If people tried to look at everything on a website, they wouldn't get anything done. So instead, they focus on the things that they're interested in and think they need. This phenomenon is known as selective attention. Highly related to selective attention is banner blindness, which is a behavior people exhibit on the web when they purposely ignore an advertisement or something that looks like one. In our recent eye-tracking studies, we observed 200 people using the web and found that they looked at advertisements in 35% of cases. That means people ignored ads 65% of the time. Let's watch an example of banner blindness. In this eye-tracking gaze replay, the dot represents where the user is looking at. Let's watch another example of banner blindness. But how can people make a decision about whether they need an item on a web page if they didn't even look at that item? There are a few indicators people draw on to make this judgment. The first is the size and shape of the element. A photo, for example, is something you can usually tell using your peripheral vision without looking directly at that photo, is not text, and probably not a button. So when people are not interested in imagery at the moment, they'll ignore those. Another side of that is when people are highly interested in something else, like the text, they will also intentionally ignore the image, as they did in our recent study, where in 41% of cases, people looked at photos, meaning they ignored them in 59% of cases. The second criterion people use is position. When people get used to a design pattern appearing in a section on pages, they learn to look there or not look there for that item. Case in point, people expect corporate logos to appear in the upper left of web pages. They look at logos to confirm which site they have reached and to get a sense of the organization's credibility and brand. So the logo can be a powerful anchor for users. That said, people often don't need to look at the logo, and in fact they ignored it in 50% of cases in our study, simply skipping past the upper left corner of pages. When people use size, shape, and position to decide whether something is worthwhile to look at in the moment, their judgment is not always right. Take carousels, for example. Many people have come to learn that carousels are large rectangles that appear toward the top of pages, containing images and a small amount of text, and having multiple screens that are scrolled through. People have also learned that carousels often contain marketing information, and so if they're not interested in that, their eyes move right past the carousel. Sometimes people even swipe or scroll to get the carousel out of the viewable area, so they can instead use that space for content they expect to be more valuable. They looked at carousels in 50% of the cases in our study. But carousels don't always contain marketing information, and in fact, sometimes they house information that users should know or would be interested in. So, consider banner blindness when choosing the container and position for your content, and know that if something resembles an ad, users might intentionally skip it even if it holds helpful information. When in doubt, ensure that important content is accessible through the global navigation, the site search, and text links.